Hello, everybody. This is Devian Xavier, and I am back with another panel discussion of Kandara Independent Film Festival, the 2020 edition. This is our inaugural edition, and apart from watching movies, we're talking to a lot of filmmakers, film curators, people who are connected to film in some way, distributors as well. Today, I'm going to be talking to Nasir, and he is a filmmaker from Pakistan. He is a film director, and he made his feature film called BACHAANA, which was released in 2016. And today we're going to talk to him about the challenges of making that film, how he went about financing the movie, the distribution process, just things that will help independent filmmakers, especially in Pakistan. So let's go ahead and start the conversation. Hey Nasser, how are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for being with us today and agreeing to talk to us and giving us your insight. So, first off, I'd just like to start by asking you to give an introduction about yourself. Mine was really brief, but just give an introduction and tell us a little bit about your journey to becoming an independent filmmaker in Pakistan, because it's not a profession that most people get into.
Yeah, especially the age category we're in. When I was growing up,
Exactly.
thing wasn't it wasn't considered a very good option as a profession because there was not a lot of the industry wasn't dynamic at that time. It wasn't professionalized. A lot of educated people weren't in the industry then. But I always had an inclination for making films. So I went and I studied in Canada. After studying and working over there in the industry, in the TV side of it, production side of it, I came back to Pakistan and I started to do content for my own production company. Started with a reality show, then some sitcoms, then I did a TV series, then I did a documentary called Made in Pakistan, and after that, I started to make ads. So commercials are a big industry for filmmakers in Pakistan, and ever since 2009, 2010, I've been making commercials with the and the purpose of doing that was that one day I'm gonna go and make my feature film. So in 2014, 15, that dream actually became a reality.
And how did you, you know, how did you go from making the commercial to making feature films? Uh, you know,
I
because
think for
obviously you got to be in the right place at the right time and know the right people as well.
I think in Pakistan, and especially the time that I'm talking about, sort of like a new wave of Pakistani cinema started in the near 2010, 2009. People were starting to make sporadically a few films were coming. So,
Yeah.
and my goal actually to be making ads was to eventually make a film. So, I mean, what we were trying to do was me and my partner all the time we were trying to our path would be such that we'd eventually end up at a film. Like we'd be fundraising, I mean, ads, etc. They're a good source of revenue. So we felt that if we were able to break into that industry, and we might be able to make a film, because at that point in time a lot of independent financing and distributors and independent production houses, they weren't it was too big of a risk to make a film. So I think whoever made films in the beginning of that era, they had to do it themselves.
And when you say it was too big a risk, I mean, at that time you still had a lot of movies being made because everybody wanted to jump on the bandwagon. Was it still difficult?
Yeah, because I think when we started making our film in 2014, we had like about 40 screens only. Then when our film released, we had about 77, like 2 years later. And then, before the lockdown and everything, and before COVID, and once the industry was gaining strength, we were at about 144 screens. So still, even at 144 or 170 screens, whatever the number is, it's even today it's not such a big number.
Mm,
So at that point in time when we were jumping into making a film, financially it's not feasible, because you have
mm,
you have like 50, 60 screens. There's a lot of competition from Indian films. Your films are gonna get like a limited um, time period of release, like a limited run on the box office. And then also uh, you don't have the star impact that Bollywood had in those times. Like in Pakistan, Bollywood stars are big, and uh, initially when these films started to be made, we were actually discovering our stars mostly. We
mm.
did have a few superstars, but apart from that, so all these elements, I feel that made it a risky proposition.
Okay. Coming back to the film, Bachana, how did you go about, or at least tell us a little bit more about the writing process, the development, and then getting it financed.
For writing, Saad Azhar was the writer for the film. We
Mm,
worked on the script for around 7 to 8 months. Yeah, he was a graduate from the US. He'd come back from California. He's a dear friend, so we started working on the film together, and trying to conceive a screenplay for that. And obviously, we'd given him uh, some constraints that we can't have a lot of characters, because
mhm.
whenever if we have a lot of characters, then it'll be difficult for us to make the movie. If we have this, it'll be difficult for us to make the movie. So we gave him some constraints and said that our screenplay needs to work with these constraints. So it was an interesting process writing it. We wrote it a lot of times. Initially, we'd set it out to be made in Bangkok, but then once a friend of mine, he told me to come to Mauritius and see the location. So once we went there and saw the location, we changed the film's location to Mauritius, and we tapered it a little bit towards how Mauritius is.
And the idea of the movie itself has sort of three countries involved in it. Was that the original idea as well, or how
No,
did that evolve?
I think the original idea was that it's an India-Pakistan film, but
Mhm,
it's not done with a political bias.
mhm,
Generally that we see that a lot of Indian films, when we see Pakistani characters in them, we're not able to believe them or see them in our daily lives. So there's such a extension of reality that we felt that let's try to do a India-Pakistan film without a political bias, in which we treat both characters as heroes. So, I mean, that was the basic germ of the idea that we went with. And then, luckily, what happened was that my friend who introduced us to Mauritius was Indian. So that became a huge source of support for us, because we
mhm.
were able, once we were in Mauritius, we were able to get some Indian crew involved. And then, since Mauritius was the place we were shooting at, it became like a triangle production where three countries were involved.
And just stepping back a little bit from the challenges of it, you mentioned that the movie was in development for 3 years before you actually went, on the floor and you started shooting it.
Yeah.
What were the challenges during the development phase for that? And do you think that is the case for most Pakistani films?
Um, for us, I mean, look, it takes about a year to at least write a film.
Hmm.
And for the and since it was our first film, it took us a year to actually go into the pre-production was long, because it was a location which wasn't it was a location which was new to us. So we know we had to go recce, then wait a few months, and then go and shoot, because there's a lot of logistical things
Hmm.
that you have to align for that. But also casting also took a while, and I think that even for you know since the release of the film, of our film in 2016, I've been actively and every day working on another feature film. I mean, doing my second film, but it hasn't happened as yet. It almost happened just before COVID, and the reason is that I think casting, the bigger your film gets, the bigger the cast you need, and then the bigger the problems of making it happen. So for me, I think that's been a impediment, getting the casting together and getting everything aligned. Because the more ambitious film that you make, the more ambitious the requirements become, and then it becomes tougher to do because obviously, because we have a certain amount of cinemas and a certain amount of box office prediction that you can go with on an average. You have to be conservative when you're making a box office prediction, and that's how you're going to decide your budget. So then the budget is going to determine a lot of times the kind of cast that you're going to be keeping. And in order to convince and have that cast in your film, it's a long process. And then also
And
the release is another thing. The first time when you're releasing a film, you don't know anything about it, and
hmm,
even once you're done with the film, that's a whole other learning curve that you have to go through.
and when you say that casting is one of the biggest impediments, why is it? Is it because of just the schedule of the actors and to sort of work around that, or is it a finance thing where actors of a certain repute are going to be very expensive?
I think it's a lot of issues. I think one, it's obviously the bigger the star, the more costly, and then there are all these peripherals which come with that, which also add to your budget. Then the second thing I feel is that uh, they need to have a comfort level with you. I think in order for them to be comfortable to work with you, I think it takes time for that comfort to develop. Unless you work with them before, I think that comfort level takes a lot of time. For in my, at least I feel that's been my experience. So that once that you develop that comfort level, then it becomes easier.
And in terms of the development process, was it? I mean, for your first film, obviously, um, it was a challenge because you had a triangle of you locations and getting people that were involved from different countries. Can you give us some idea of how to better deal with it now? If you look at it in hindsight, what would you have done that you think would have
Uh,
helped you, or something you
I
wish
think
someone would have told you?
I think the pre-production and the production phase, we were okay with that because we shot our film like in under 30 days. So
Okay.
what we had planned, we did that because we rehearsed our schedule a lot. We went into fine detail of our schedule. We had done a comprehensive recce. These things are really important. And once we were able to do that, I think we were able to stick to our schedule and come within our budget. But the releasing side of it, a filmmaker is not going to know, like the marketing side of it, the releasing side of it. Although it's gotten better in Pakistan, when we were coming with our film, we didn't know much, like what date is going to be important, how what date is going to affect your box office, when, if you should come in the summers, if you should come in the winters, if you should come when the cinema there's already a lot of audience going, so you're going to have some of the footfall divide into your film also organically. So I think that the release of it and how the business side of it, how much money you're going to be receiving, when the payback is going to be, uh, and then how you're going to set your marketing plans, and how you're going to make sure that those marketing plans are implemented, because those were places that I felt that uh, we didn't have any knowledge of, like and those are key components, I think, that as a filmmaker in Pakistan, because you're going to be doing all these tasks yourself, you need to be aware of this.
So it's actually very appropriate that you started talking about distribution and all these components that you didn't know about, because my next question is actually going to be about Hum TV coming on board as a distributor. So can you tell us how that relationship developed? How they came on board, and what was the strategy that you and Hum TV sort of decided on or developed for the release of Bachana?
I think there's two ways to go about it, but what happened with ours was initially sometimes a distributor is involved in the beginning nowadays, like they are investors in the film also, so that they have a stake and they have a idea of everything from the beginning. So I think it's better to plan it that way also. But what happened with us was that we self-financed the movie. So once we were done with it, once we cut the trailer, only then did we start connecting to potential distributors. So we got good interest from distributors, and we felt that Hum was like-minded and on our wavelength. So we connected with them and took them on as our distributor. Hum Films and Everready, which is also one of the oldest
Mm,
distribution houses of Pakistan, and
yes.
that's how that went about. It was pretty clear cut. I mean, and they were supportive and they tried to help us. But I think all of us were learning at that point in time. It was early on for them also, and it was our first time. So all of us were learning, and as we were learning, we were seeing, where and how we could have done things differently or things more to benefit the film.
And you said that there are two ways to go about it. What is
I
the
think
other way?
nowadays, like the other way is that generally nowadays, a lot of times a distributor will probably come on board from the beginning. So they'll be an investor and a stakeholder in the film from the beginning. So that's what happens is that once you make someone a stakeholder in your film from the beginning, that then their money is invested for a longer time, and I think it's in their interests to for them, so that the film reaches its box office and financial potential. So I think that's a
Mm.
good way to go about it. It also cuts down some of your risk, and in an industry like ours, there is a lot of risk. So you can cut down your risk also, and you can have a stakeholder who has a lot of experience, and they can guide you more properly. Because if I'm a first-time filmmaker and if I'm deciding the date of release, all the marketing strategy, it's I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I think that a distributor, exhibitor, I mean, you need to get all these pools of opinions in and then work through that, I think.
So what is the right? How do you go about deciding your date of release? Like, what are the factors that you, as a filmmaker, have to consider?
I mean, in Pakistan, the most popular date of release is Eid, because you know that people are gonna come on Eid, and they're gonna, because it's a holiday, there's excess money, there's the people are looking for some form of entertainment. So, but obviously now that you have to go beyond Eid also. So I think it also depends on the film, and it also depends on the marketing strategy for the film. Like, winters is a good time, like December. The summers are a good time because it's so hot outside. People want to
Mm.
go inside the cinemas and watch a movie. But I think what's key is that you need a good date also, where there's a lot of footfall anyways, and then also you need a very solid marketing strategy and a very aggressive marketing strategy, because those two things are which are going to determine, which are going to help bring people to the cinemas. So I think even if you have a very good product, these two critical factors, I think, will influence the kind of business that a film can do.
And what was the strategy that you and Hum sort of decided on to push the picture so that it did get maximum box office figures?
I think that since they came on board late, and since it was our first time, and I think at that end, the marketing end of it, we weren't that successful at the marketing end of it. I think our big push came from word of mouth after people saw the film. So
Mm.
then it got a longer run. They liked it, and it ran for longer than expected, and it did better than we felt that after the opening weekend it would do. So I think that is more so. That wasn't more of a it, I mean, the marketing did. I mean, on social and digital, we were stronger than on television. But television is still a very big medium. Although
Mm.
now, since the last 4 years, A lot of it has changed, but I feel that that repeat and that push to action, that happens a lot because of television marketing. So I think that that's also something that you need to be focusing on when you're doing a film.
And can you elaborate a little bit more on the 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 sort of tick marks that you have, as a filmmaker when you're a filmmaker or a distributor when you have to formulate a strategy for a film.
Uh, I think for Pakistan, it's partnerships basically. That's critical. You need partnerships with brands so that, if a brand is incorporated in your film subtly, what happens is that you're able to get them from a marketing collateral. And then if a distributor, you have someone early on, they're also going to be a stakeholder. And as I said, they're going to be getting
Mm.
access. So these things, I think, they help build up and hype the film. Uh, and not so you're not the one who's only it's not only your expense. Like you're not the only one who is going to be just responsible for the marketing of the film. Because if that happens, then it's going to be a tough call and it's going to be a tough ask for you as a filmmaker, because that's not your key area of expertise. Some people do have that, but a lot of people, filmmakers are only focused towards the creative side. So I think building partnerships is critical for filmmaking in Pakistan.
And what are the key areas of focus that as filmmakers? I mean, digital is obviously such a huge platform now, and I've seen a lot of filmmakers, independent filmmakers, for short films specifically, who keep advertising on social media. But what are the, or at least in your opinion, apart from having a partnership with a big brand or whatever, what works, or what do you think works well, or what do you think filmmakers need to understand to be able to formulate their strategies better, apart from having partnerships or whatever?
I think the first thing for any film is a good content, good script.
Mm.
I think that's critical and that's key, and that's where all the work needs to be done. Everything else is irrelevant if you don't have something good to say, and also that you need to have something to say also in your script. I think if you have something to say in your script, and then if it's entertaining and engaging, I think that's step one, and everything else is beyond that. I think your
Mm.
content needs to be strong, and your content needs to work. Otherwise the audience loses. Uh, they lose confidence in cinema. They because now it's a pretty expensive thing going to a cinema for a family, and for them to go and spend that sort of money, they need to be getting their money's worth. So I think the content and then the packaging of the content, how you're going to be presenting, how you're going to be marketing, what's the strategy. So on every level, I feel that this needs to work for a film in Pakistan to be successful.
And how does one go sort of packaging a film? Do you have to keep that in mind in the pre-production phase when you're developing, when you're writing, or uh, do you start to think about it once your film is cut? Like for you, you had to obviously cut a trailer
When
and then get Hum on board.
I think when you're writing it, right, you have that idea. You need to be thinking of how will I be able to sell this idea to an audience? What is my audience, and how will I be able to sell it to them? Because eventually we're making films for people, and it can be specific people or like a niche audience. That's your call as a filmmaker, whatever you want to do. But you need to be careful in thinking how will I be able to sell this to an audience also. What is my audience, and how will I be able to sell this to an audience? I think these are questions that you need to ask. Because what
And
happens otherwise is, Vivian, you make a movie and then you don't make another one. And in an industry like ours, that's disastrous, because
mm,
one person who's already gone and experienced the filmmaking process, if they are not going to be making another movie, then the pool of filmmakers is going to be shrinking, and then we're going to be dependent on outside content for to run our industry. And as we saw when Indian films were banned over here, that's a major issue and a major problem for the industry, that you have to rely just on foreign content.
and because you brought up the issue of you know, it's sort of filmmakers not having the chance to make second movies, and you know, have you seen or have you witnessed any sort of any filmmakers who unfortunately have to be left by the wayside because their first film just didn't do well? Um, have there been
It,
any cases of that, or have you seen something that you would
I,
recommend as okay, you know, that's the best way to sort of move forward in terms of packaging?
I think a lot of times, I mean, this has happened because you put in so much money, and if you don't get that return, then and you have because in Pakistan, a producer is gonna approximately get 30% of the revenues of the film, of the box office of the film, and that's the major place where they're earning from. And then you sell digital, then you sell television, and you get a chunk back from that. But if you lose a crore or more than that in investment, it's you know it's going to be tough to bounce back from that. So I think that even even if some films are successful, if they've made money, even then it's a tricky thing because even if a film makes, let's say, a certain amount, you're only getting 30% of that.
Mm,
So you might not be covering your budget, or you're just about covering your budget. If you're just about covering your budget, then the task becomes monumental. But if you have partners, if you have these strategic partnerships, then it becomes then it's a little weight off your shoulders, because as a filmmaker you're already juggling so many things,
mm.
and if there's some weight off your shoulders, then you're able to, I think, you're able to make that the next one.
And earlier you had said that you and your partner self-financed the film. Can you talk a little bit more about how you went about self-financing? Is it just money out of your own pocket,
Yeah,
or did you raise funds somewhere?
no, it was just we earned money, and with the sole goal was to make a film. So we worked hard, and we just collected money. And then once we had enough to, shoot the film, we went on and shot the film. Because I mean, at that point in time, we felt that nobody's going to trust us and give us a lot of money to make a film. And even if they do, there's going to be so many compromises, so many that we won't be able to make the film that we want to make. So we thought that it's better to go and try to do it ourselves. But that's also a difficult process for, to raise that much money to make a film.
Mm.
That's not going to cultivate the industry. I mean, to cultivate the industry, you need finances, you need distributors, you need people with money coming in and, working with creative people and making films. If you're just going to be dependent on creative people to raise their money and make films, then you're going to have fewer number of films, and that's what's happening in Pakistan.
Rightly as you pointed out, the need for an organized industry is quite high in Pakistan because we're not making as many films, and with the ban on Bollywood films, there isn't really much content that's running in the cinemas right now. Um, is it even a trend that will change? Do you think that things will get helped in the future? Like, how do you see this thing sort of playing out in the next few years at least?
I think since COVID, it's it's changed our world, and it's hit cinema really hard. Not only for us, for everybody all over the world. I mean,
Yeah.
people are starting to go back, but they're not going back in those numbers. And when they'll go back in those numbers, still questionable. So the good thing is that we have a few films which are already shot, or they're ready. So at least there is a lineup which Pakistan has. But for people to be making new films, I think that's something that they're pondering over with a lot of. They're being very careful, if they should be starting to make new films right now, until there's a lot more clarity on the way cinema is going. But then again, the silver lining is that we have these digital platforms on which you can make films for them and make digital content for them. And until I think there's clarity over here, I think that's an avenue that needs to be uh, pursued to the
Explored.
fullest. Uh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, Nasser, the coming back to your film Bachana, that was like a triangle of uh, countries that were involved. What what were the biggest challenges apart from from the casting? Just logistically, how did you go about doing that? Like, it must have been quite monumental, especially for a debut film.
I think, but we had good support. We had good support in Mauritius. The government there was really supportive. They've got an excellent program to help filmmakers who come over there. And then also we had a very good line producer, a friend, dear friend of mine, Ashutosh. He was from India, so I think that worked out pretty well. We were able to do it efficiently, and we were a smaller crew, so that made life easier. And then all of us were at one location. I mean, all of us were there at Mauritius, so for dates and everything, those issues weren't there. So we knew that we're here to work
Hmm.
and finish the film. So I think logistically, I think that there weren't too many issues for us.
And what are the lessons you've learned that you sort of applied in your second film? Hopefully, which will get done soon.
I think obviously, you work harder on the content every time because there's a lot of learning that's done once you see your film on screen. I think that definitely every time, I think that's one lesson that has to be there. Even for every ad we make, we feel that we need to make the content better visually. We need to make it better. We need to improve on all elements of it. But I think the business side is were huge learnings for me as far as partnerships and packaging the movie, selling the movie, marketing the movie. I think I learned a lot. Although that might not be in my domain as a filmmaker, but in Pakistan, I think that has to be part of the arsenal of information that I have. If I need to be keeping on making films on a regular basis.
So, do you think there's a dire and strict need of creative producers in Pakistan, or people who are well versed in the finance side of things uh, to be part of productions as well? Do we actually even have people who know the film side and the finance side, together?
Yeah, uh, I think more so than even creative producers, we need people who are uh, financiers, who are going to be putting large amounts of money behind young people, young filmmakers, and they can work out the structure and the budgets, etc. But we need more financial input so that we can create more content. We need to be at least, if we have 52 weeks, we need to be doing a film a week, and we're nowhere near that right now.
Hmm. Uh, Again, sticking to the financing side of things, uh, right now, from the research that I've done, a lot of the movies that get financed or get made have either the bigger television stations backing them, either to produce or to distribute, and oftentimes they come on board, as executive producers as well. Sometimes, if depending on what the situation is there any way that filmmakers in Pakistan can actually raise financing other than those situations? Is there, because it's an industry that is not organized. We use the word industry, but it doesn't come close to filling that sort of that space of an industry, like you have banking, or you have agriculture, or whatever. That the term of industry, it doesn't
Yeah,
really fit that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's not organized. If someone, the reason why people don't come, there's not like an influx of people putting their money in movies is because there's not an organized payout strategy also. So if
Yeah.
someone like cinemas receive money on the same day, right, but they don't pay the distributors the same day, the filmmaker doesn't get paid the same day. There's a huge lag of when your money, your ticket is bought, and the filmmaker eventually receives his money. Now that's such a self-defeating concept in itself, because if I've made a movie and if I'm going to be paid 6 to 8 months after I've made the film, if I'm going to be receiving all my box office receipts, it's going to take me longer to make the next film. So until and unless it's organized, it actually makes sense for uh, exhibitors to actually embolden and make life easier for producers, distributors, because they're the ones who are going to bring them local content. But I guess it's such a common sense of a thing, but it's maybe they're not able to see that.
So I remember that in this example, I it's something that we've I've emailed you about before. Is the cooperative sort of strategy was uh, that was there for the parallel cinema in India, and I'm not making any parallels between that cinema and Pakistani cinema, or that we're in the infancy stage or whatever, for people who are watching. I'm just trying to figure out, is that one way to move forward, is to sort of band together to raise the finances, and then sort of once the movie recuperates, that goes back into the coffers to make the next movie. Is that a strategy, or do you think that will still lack, or will still have some sort of impediments?
I think until and unless the payout strategy of people recouping their money is transparent, and it's not even transparent. You don't even know. I mean, exactly the numbers, what your film has done, and exactly how many people came in the cinema. So you don't even. That's not even transparent. And then after that, I mean, it takes a while to get your money back. So whatever formula that you create of fundraising for a film, any formula is fine, I think, as long as you can make a film. If you can have a co-op, you can have independent producers, you can have brands, but essentially there needs to be a proper transparent payout strategy. And until and unless that's there, I think it's not going to speed up the process of making films.
So what's the best strategy you think to? I know this is a very loaded question, but what's the best strategy to move forward to ensure that the industry actually develops to become an organized industry? Or do you think it's too big to sort of look at
uh,
now?
I think that people are, I think they are organizations, they are associations, they are trying to make an effort, but mostly individually. um, I think that for now, I think we just need to, I mean, tide this path. I mean, this we need to overcome this COVID time and get our cinemas back open, start making movies again, and then I think there needs to be maybe a 5 year plan for, with stages, and the government needs to take some sort of ownership, and not even ownership or form a committee. There needs to be an implementation strategy, because unless there's an implementation strategy, any sort of committee or any sort of like suggestions that our associations give, they become irrelevant unless there is an implementation strategy. So even if they're like small baby steps that we're taking, but there's an implementation strategy which helps us deliver on those steps. um, it's tough. I think it's tough.
And what steps do you think should be taken? You know,
I think first and foremost, I think the payment to producers, that's critical, I think. I mean, I know that once the distributors get money very quickly, once producers get money more quickly, once it's seen as a transparent industry, once we can have some sort of a system in which box office is reported transparently. I mean, these few steps, I think if these can be done, this will also have a big impact.
I want to sort of move back to the beginning of our discussion, where we spoke about the development process, and you said one of the key things is is the script. I personally feel that the quality of the scripts are severely lacking. Uh, so why do you think that that is the case? Do you agree with me if it is lacking, and if it is, why do you think that is the case for a majority of the Pakistani films?
I think because there are a couple of reasons. One, it's very new. Mostly we're first time filmmakers. So once you get a good idea, you get so excited by it that you're like, let's go and do this, and this is going to be great. But as far as the craft is concerned, we have we have fewer writers who are very strong in this craft of the screenplay. So I think until and unless we get writers who are very strong in the craft of the screenplay, and that happens actually with writing a lot, with having a heritage of a lot of good writing, with having a heritage of learning from writers, with having writers' rooms where a lot of writers are sitting together and developing stuff. So I think that right now it's mostly like a one man show where writers are on their own and they have to write. So now some are brilliant and talented and they're able to deliver, but some might have a great idea, but they might not have the craft for it. So then it becomes a little half baked. And then you also need to give time to a script. At least it's like a year long process. And then if a person is putting 1 year of his life from writing a script, and what's the remuneration what that he's getting
Hmm.
for it, he or she, what are they getting for it? So writers need to be respected and they need to be paid a lot more. And then coming back, once the producers are paid properly and quickly, they can pay the writers more. That's how because if the content is not good, then you can have whatever you want and it's not going to work.
I it's a it's funny that you mentioned the writers' room and those sort of like mentorship programs. I know that there's one uh, that's being done, which is called Columbus. But we've had especially I remember in the '90s at least, the PTV dramas that I watched were they're still put on a pedestal as some of the best writing that has come out of Pakistan. You have the '70s, the '80s, the '90s, especially the PTV stuff that was happening. You know, there was that, and then we have content that is written now. Why do you think that it's not as close to as good as that? Uh, you know,
I think when what I've heard about PTV is that they used to be rehearsals, they used to take time to write, they used to be focusing on just one content and creating an amazing content, and that's how it's done. And it's not that we don't have talented writers right now, but I think it's just that at that point it was much newer, so there was much more passion. Now it's a lot more about people need to see, that's the way society is, that they need to see value for money also. They need to see that if I'm going to be putting a year's worth of my talent and hard work into something, what am I going to get out of it? And if they're not going to get out of that much out of it, then fewer people will be able to give that passion. Okay, passion, it has to be passion driven, but it also has to make sense for their daily lives. And I think
mm,
that's where there's a problem. Then also, now I think one advantage that we have now is that there's so much, like now, if I want to learn something, I can just go out on YouTube, get a master class. If I'm stuck somewhere, I can have whatever professor I want be my mentor without actually meeting him or seeing
mm.
him, just by seeing their tutorials, seeing their video content. And I think that's something that maybe we're not also that's something we're not also actually taking to our advantage.
Well, Nasser, is there anything that you would like to tell the independent filmmakers of Pakistan before we officially end the conversation? Is there something that you wish someone told you when you started out?
I think one thing that I think that we need to be reminded is that we have the potential to tell stories that can change the world. We have the potential to mm, make content which can inspire people, which can, make the world look at us. So we need to have this belief and we need to have this faith. And I think if we do that, I think that there's no stopping at what we can do. So I think keep this inspiration in your mind when you're writing and when you're trying to produce that. And nowadays it's so easy, if you can literally make something unique and you can tell your story to the world.
Well, Nasir, thank you for joining us today, for taking out time and giving us your insight and talking about things that they're difficult, but they need to be said. And good luck with your second venture. I hope that you can get it off the floor pretty soon once COVID
Thank you.
is done.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Wonderful talking to you.
Same here.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye. So, guys, that was Nasser. He was talking about his film Bachana, the pitfalls of making a first feature, the learning curves, and everything in between. Uh, I hope that you guys could take some lessons from it. You were inspired by it, and understand the importance of content. I would just like to add um, about something that Akira Kurosawa, a favorite filmmaker of mine, said about writing, and because it's something that Nasser had brought up as well, is that a lot of young filmmakers need to read, even if it's a little bit. They need to read to be able to expand their minds and to expand their imagination and to be able to learn the craft of writing, but also storytelling, which is not just important for writers, but everybody who's involved with film. Um, I'd like to thank you for being with us for this session, and enjoy the film festivals, support film festivals, because that's how young filmmakers get their films out there in the world. They and other filmmakers get to see what's happening in the rest of the world, how other filmmakers are working. They get inspired, and they get that drive to make their films as well and tell their stories. Um, because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, and it's important to tell the stories and move you, because those stories might just change someone's life if they haven't changed ours already. I'm Vivian Xavier. Thank you again for joining us for GIFF 2020. Take care. Bye bye.